Hi guys, and welcome back to History of Vision Success. And we are going to go back into the A-level course, and we are this time going to look at a thematic topic on how effective the Nazi economy was up until 1939. Now, we can break the economy down into three sections. Recovery from 1933 to 1936 under Schacht. Rearmament from 1936 to 1939 under Göring. And war from 1939 to 1945 under Speer. I'll try and get out of the way so you can see him. Anyway, now the later section on war, we're going to address later on when we look at Germany going to war itself. Okay, so this key question really about the effectiveness of the economy is focused on these two earlier sections from 1933 to 1939. So kind of how far was Germany able to recover from the depression that they promised to end, and how far were they able to achieve kind of an economically viable state? Now, in January 1933, the German economy was in the depths of depression, with nearly 6 million out of work. This problem had not been fixed by any of the previous regimes, and many had voted for Hitler because they really believed his promise that he would get people back into work. By 1935, unemployment figures showed that unemployment had fallen to 2 million. And it was on this basis that Nazi propagandists hailed the success of the economic miracle. One of the key issues you'll need to address is how far this economic miracle actually existed. So let's start by looking at Hitler's main aims. So he wanted to tackle the depression and restore Germany to full employment. He wanted to have an economic recovery, which would enable more resources to be utilized to rebuild Germany's military might. He also wanted to create I'm going to try and say this right, Wehrwirtschaft, a defense economy, an economy geared towards the needs of war. This was shared by nationalists and those in the army at the time, and was partly inspired by the idea that Germany had lost the First World War because they had suffered an economic blockade. So, how can we make Germany powerful enough economically that we're going to win this war because we can finance ourselves? Right, I'm now going to go through each section in a summary, and then remember I'm going to have videos on depth for each of these sections afterwards. So this is like an overview of the whole question approach, and then you need to go and watch the depth videos afterwards. So I'll start with recovery. Now remember, 1933 to 1936 under Schacht. So policies. Now, the main policies that Schacht enacted in this time was to try and reinflate the economy via government spending, public works, subsidies, rearmament, okay? Now, this led to problems, and those problems were that we had a balance of payment deficit as economic recovery led to a rising demand for consumer goods. However, rearmament also led to a rising demand for raw materials. So all of this meant that as kind of the standard of life felt like it was getting better, we have people demanding more goods. The rearmament also needs more raw materials to make weapons and things like that. So we have the danger of inflation as increased demand meant increased money supply, okay? Now this led to Schacht's kind of second new policy, the new plan. And the new plan had controls on currency and bilateral trade agreements, and the government therefore controlled wages and prices. Now, this again led to problems. And the problem that we reached under Schacht and under recovery was really that we had a disagreement over priority. Schacht favored kind of boosting exports, slow rearmament, really allowing the economy to recover slowly, but I guess more effectively, whereas Hitler and Göring favored rapid rearmament. So what did this lead to? Well, this led to the phase we call rearmament, and we have a change of leadership. So in 1936, Göring takes over in charge of finance. And in terms of policies, we have the 1936 four-year plan. This was to prepare for war, develop autarky by expanding domestic production abroad, extend government controls, and expand rearmament. Again, this leads to problems. And the problems that we faced under rearmament was that we had the danger of the economy overheating as we have a shortage of labor and raw materials. Prices are also rising. So under rearmament, the real issue is we only have a certain amount of foreign currency and we only have a certain amount of money. Now, do we spend that money on improving the quality of living standards for ordinary people and ensuring they have food, or do we spend that money on rearmament? And that is, I guess, the ultimate dilemma faced by the Nazi state at this time. And it's where Schacht and Göring and Hitler disagreed, and Göring is now in control. And that's the main problem for this time period. Now, very briefly, just because it doesn't make sense if I don't really go over it, we know we get to war by 1939. The economy under the war is led by Speer. And because of all these issues we have with not having enough money, not having enough resources, the answer to all of this is blitzkrieg. And essentially what Hitler does is he ensures he can finance his rearmament by plundering foreign countries, okay? So under war, we have a total war economy, which I'm going to explain later on when we get to our war topic, which is nearer the end of the course. So the following videos that I'm going to film for you are going to go through kind of depth analysis on recovery, on rearmament, on an evaluation of impact on living standards for ordinary people. And from there, we can assess, just like we did with the terror state, how effective Nazi economic policy was at achieving their goals. Now, in terms of questions that you might be asked about this, so you're likely going to be asked a question focused on how far the economic miracle was achieved. So you'll need to assess how effective economic policy was at achieving both Nazi goals and economic revival. Now, I believe that the economic miracle was not achieved as propaganda emphasized it had been. Instead, the focus on rearmament meant that improving the reality for ordinary people is sidelined. Foundations of economic reform were definitely laid very effectively by Schacht, and there could have been quite a significant improvement in the quality of life in Germany. However, I would suggest that Hitler's aims were inconsistent with economic improvement for the masses. You can take these arguments and you can apply them where you need to fit the question. Remember, the trick with A-level history, I keep saying, is we have to just take something and make it fit all the time. So we've got a conclusion here and we need to then find out what the question on this topic is and bend our conclusion to fit it. So if we were to get, for example, the question, the economic miracle was simply a propaganda myth by 1939, you'd argue that whilst foundations were laid by Schacht for significant economic improvement, by 1939, living conditions and ordinary economic well-being in Germany suffered due to the focus on rearmament, and therefore the propaganda myth was far more exaggerated than the reality. On the other hand, you could get a question that asks something like, did Hitler achieve his aim in economic policy? And, this again is quite a difficult conclusion to reach, and there's not really a clear-cut answer to it. In a sense, he effectively rearmed Germany to a state where he's able to go to war and win a series of very successive, very fast victories. Equally, unemployment appeared to be resolved. So on that sense, it seems like he does achieve his aims. However, his aim to achieve or to reduce unemployment was only really achieved through rearmament, as many young men were conscripted into the army and went therefore into a group of invisible unemployed. Furthermore, the rearmament that occurred was chaotic and not sustainable without the benefit of raw materials won from foreign nations. Autarky is never really achieved and the war is inevitably lost. So, can we really say that Hitler achieved his aims? Now, another thing we might need to consider in this process is, to what extent was the economic recovery really just a result of other factors? The extent to which the Depression was naturally reaching a turning point, along with the legacy of effective economic policies left behind by the Weimar government. Another intricacy we have to evaluate, and again, depending on the question, you can raise this suggestion in your answer. It could be a paragraph or a factor in your essay, depending on what the question is. Now, this is how we strive to achieve kind of those sophisticated A-star quality answers, rather than just saying, yes or no. So It's clear that judging the success of Nazi economic policy is not going to be easy. And I'm going to film a video on how to answer different essay questions right at the end of this topic for you to kind of help you contextualize all this information and put it into an essay. You'll need to watch the following videos on the depth and explanation on financial policy in order to have enough information to approach essay questions on this topic. So please keep watching.